he had this moment where he had the faith. He had probably said, I believe Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But in that moment on Aldersgate Street where they're having this church meeting, suddenly God does something that makes it real in a way that it wasn't before, that it transcends his mind and his voice, but changes his heart, and it becomes real for him, and he has this assurance that he didn't have before. Incidentally, when this happened, Wesley had already been a priest for 13 years. For 13 years, he had been practicing the methodical spiritual disciplines for which Methodists got named. He had been reading, he had been praying, he had been writing about what he had been reading, he had been giving his money in such a way that it became a tithe where he gave 10% of his income. He had been serving the poor. He had been, as a priest, he had been leading other people and doing worship and teaching them about Christ. All of this presumably proclaiming the whole time that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But it takes 13 years before that proclamation, before God brings God's part and it transforms his heart. And if you know the story of John Wesley, after that happens, his effectiveness and what he does in the world begins to change different. And it's really out of there that the Methodist movement explodes and then later becomes a church. But it took time. Now, when it did happen for Wesley, it was kind of like switching a light switch. He could name the time and the place and exactly where it was when that switch happened, and something happened in his heart. For other people, instead of it being like a light switch, it's more like a dial. And over time, events happen, and it sort of turns the dial of faith up a notch, and then another event happens and the dial gets turned up another notch, and you get maybe years, maybe decades down the road, and you look at who you were decades ago and who you are today, and in the midst of it you see the hand of God at work, and it's like, this is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But it's taken time to get there.